So for today, we might get to do something with a car, rather than me talking about things all the time and be literally like a talking vlog. But really, this isn't really not a vlog anyway. Anyway, so today we are going to be side gapping. So before you guys proceed any further, I have one thing to say is, if you are willing to sacrifice the life of, or the remaining amount of life in your spark plugs, then go right on ahead. But if you don't want to sacrifice the life of these spark plugs, then stop right here, because this will probably kill the spark plug's life around maybe, I don't know, maybe 30,000 miles, something like that. I mean, usually there's some cars out there where you change or service the spark plugs or regap the spark plugs every 50,000 miles or something like that. I don't know. So bottom line is, don't proceed if you want your spark plugs to last as long as they can possibly. So before I get into things, here are the advantages and disadvantages of side gapping your plugs. Now, side gapping your plugs, you actually get more of a bigger spark at the center electrode right there to the ground strap, because electricity likes to follow to the least resistance, so it's going to try to hit the shoulder of that center electrode, and then it's going to start growing toward the outside of the ground strap. So it's going to start at the bottom and go to the very top, and then it's going to create a bigger spark. Bigger spark equals bigger boom, really. Technically less fuel is wasted in the cylinder, making it more efficient. So the things you need to side gap your plugs is, you'll need a gap, you'll need a spark plug gapper tool, safety glasses, preferably ANSI approved, because you don't want these shattering in your face. A couple red rags, well, blue rag, any rag will work fine, really. And you need a, let me get this, you need a vise. Yeah, preferably a vise. I mean, sure, you could get someone to hold it for you, but it's kind of dangerous. Oh, right, I forgot. Another thing you'll probably need is these little grinding pads. These grinding pads are, well, they're grinder pads. It's really not much else to say. Like a wire brush or something to clean off maybe remaining of carbon on a spark plug that you want to work out that's in your engine. And another thing you need is a Dremel, preferably a Dremel. You could do it with a file, but it's just going to take longer to grind down the ground electrode or ground strap to the appropriate length. And you want some sandpaper. Sandpaper is a must. Another thing you'll probably need is a file. Not too aggressive. A file that's not too aggressive, because if you grind off too much material or something like that, then it's going to get harder to regap the ground strap to the ground electrode, or the electrode. Right, I forgot. Another thing you need is some gloves. Technically any plug would work. AC Delcos, Champion plugs, but I'm getting bad luck with Champion plugs recently, since one of the Champion plugs almost like detonated my engine because it wasn't firing properly. So yeah, that's a little bit of excitement for you. You can get at any local auto parts store, O'Reilly's, which I kind of like to call O'Reilly's, because they're kind of vague if they have the parts or not. Or you could go to AutoZone, which AutoZone I preferably call a pedicure store, because they most of the time only have air fresheners and such, all those little kind of feminine necessities. So a few things to go over: gloves, and a file, and safety glasses. You can get safety glasses at Walmart for $2, $3, maybe $4, or you could go to Harbor Freight and get some for like $2. I think this was like on a sale for $1. And you need some spare spark plugs, because some of these spark plugs have a different thread pattern, so they won't exactly point the right direction. And just an FYI, this is completely up to your risks if you want to do this modification to your spark plugs, because if you don't grind off or file off some of the let's call them fragments, like little bits of if there's like a little burr on the spark plug that you grind it off with a Dremel or the file, and there's little bits of piece of metal in there, that could become hot enough to become like a source of a ignition, so you'll get detonation. Well, as long as you do it correctly. Now, before you start cutting a ground electrode off, or the ground strap off, man, I'm making a lot of mistakes today. You want to mark the ground strap around probably half of where the, let's see here, probably around there. Around where it's center above the center electrode. So I'm just gonna mark it right here with this little screw I have with a sharp end. There you go. Now there's a, well, the camera, if the camera would focus. Nope, it's not gonna focus. Okay, fine, be that way. Anyway, you're gonna need to make a little, or etch a little mark where you're going to cut it, because it's easy to lose sight of where the mark is when you have a Dremel in your freaking face. And of course, you need to accommodate for the thickness of this Dremel as well. So even cut less if you want. And so you can inch closer and closer and closer until the ground strap is perfectly, the ground strap's bottom corner is aligned with the shoulder of the electrode out to the very left. This is preferably how you want the ground strap to be like. It's the corner, the bottom corner of the ground strap intersects with the corner of the electrode, or the center electrode. Are you seeing that? Well, just let the camera focus if it is focusing. There you go. So you want, this is technically the plug that you want it to kind of look like. Now, before you can start cutting and working on one of your spark plugs, you want to make sure that one of these spark plugs actually somewhat aligns with the open end toward the exhaust valve. When I first started looking at where the exhaust valve is on this car, it's going to be, well, this is a big block Mopar, by the way, so if you're working on a big block Chevy or something like that, it could vary. Let's see here. Exhaust valve, intake. Exhaust valve, and then intake. We're just right next to it. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 in cylinders. So exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, exhaust, intake, exhaust, or no, intake and then exhaust. So the most outer ones are exhaust, and then the both inner ones right down there is intake. Another thing I forgot to mention is you might not want to do this in a engine which has high mileage, or it burns a little bit of oil, or if you have a couple cylinders that's okay and fine, they're burning fine, but you have one cylinder that's burning a bit of oil. Do not use this side gapping trick, as it completely exposes that center electrode, and the oil fouling or the fuel fouling, whatever you're getting, could put out the spark and make your fouling worse on that spark, or on that spark plug, or on that cylinder, and then cause it to run even worse. So yes, do this on a engine that's somewhat has good compression, but not the kind of compression that you want where the rings are worn out and the oil is causing the compression ratings to go up. Another thing I didn't go into too much depth earlier is the reason you're going to be lessening the lifespan of this spark plug is because the ground strap is technically not above the center electrode anymore, so the center electrode will wear to one side, and then you're going to need to re-gap the spark plug from time to time so that this ground strap stays close within range of the center electrode, so it continues to send spark after spark. So yeah, it's lower lifespan for the spark plug, but slightly more performance, and there's a considerable difference in my car. It has a more throaty rumble to it. The idle is much smoother. So I think you guys can see from over there, it's time to put on your safety glasses and put your gloves on, or glove, whatever fits on your hand that you're working with, and get your Dremel ready. And cover your ears and lower your volume in case this might get too loud. I'll give you 2 seconds. All right, now we're grinding. Alright, so as you guys can see, it is a perfect, almost like a J-shaped. There's actually some things where people actually sell pre-made plugs that looks like this, and they call them J-plugs, because it looks like a upside down J. But as you can see, that center electrode is not being covered by the ground strap anymore, which is technically what you need. To gap the, you want to gap the spark plug at, so it's like comes in diagonal like that, sort of like that. I think you're seeing it. It's like you want to gap it so that it's diagonally like that, right in there. You want to subtract around 10 thousandths of an inch of your specification numbers. So my car calls for, let's say, 35 thousandths. So you take 10 thousandths away from that and you'll get 25 thousandths. So as I said from earlier, you're going to need to subtract 10 thousandths of an inch, or 10 thousandths of an inch, yes. And in my case, my specifications calls for 35 thousandths, but you're going to need to go, subtract 10 thousandths from it, and that's going to be 25 thousandths for me. So let's see here. Now this is unmodified at this current point, so I would probably need to adjust the gap later. Oh, that's actually, surprisingly, I got it in the first go. which is really quite surprising. That's a snug fit 25 thousandths inch. I forgot to mention as well, you can get these two types of the gap checkers. Right now, I kind of prefer the flat knife-shaped gap checker rather than this wire gap checker, since at times the flat knife gap checker sometimes is kind of a bit finicky when it's between the gap, but in this case, I don't want to really use this one because this was kind of inaccurate at first. So yeah, if you can, try use the knife gauge checker instead of the wire gauge checker. But if you only have this, then just try your best and check the gap as best as you can. I just cut this off right now, and it is very, very sharp around the edges. What you're gonna need is, with the file or sandpaper, you're going to need the sandpaper later, and you're going to need to do this. I'm going to set you down for a moment so I can use both my hands to grind off some of or deburr it. So this is technically what you need to do. Make sure your vise is pretty tight and holding on to that spark plug, and we're going to do the top one first, or the deburr the top first. Now you want to use a diagonal pushing motion like this. You don't want to pull it, because it's going to create these little ridge lines, like it's going to make the shape of like a file, like these little jagged edges. It's going to make that sort of a pattern on the ground strap here. Now for the underside of the ground strap, which is kind of a bit hard to get to, you're going to need to do this, and I'll bring you over here so you can see what I'm doing. Now from over here, you're going to need to position your sandpaper in such a way where the sandpaper fits underneath the ground strap and technically get under its chin, if you will, and start grinding. Of course, I'm doing this one-handed, so it's a bit difficult. Getting pretty better, my English just went out the window right there. You don't want to deburr it to the point where it kind of has a rounded edge, because if it has a rounded edge, then the spark won't jump aggressively rather than when it has a sharp corner. So you preferably want some sharpness to the corner at the bottom chin of the ground strap. So next we're going to take the file, and then you're going to be grinding the face of the ground strap that you just cut off. And be careful not to touch or scuff the center electrodes, since the center electrode could get damaged and the nickel plating or whatever you have on there is going to be gone. Preferably you can do this. Add a little bit of a sandpaper, or any paper really, or even a rag would work, and place it so it covers the center electrode, and then put your file on top of it like that, so it completely guards against the center electrode from the file, so you don't grind it off. But keep in mind that the file in no time can grind off the sandpaper and go right through to the center electrode. Well then, that's actually looking pretty good. You want the face of this ground strap so it's like a silverish color. If there's any hint of a little bit of carbon or a little bit of black particles on that face right there, buff it off and, well, yeah, just deburr it really. So now, if you did this, let me bring it over here. Now if you did this properly, the plug will now give a bigger and better spark in the combustion chamber rather than it being shielded by the ground strap. So the thing to note upon doing this modification, you may see considerable more performance from your engine. Certainly I did, because my engine's pretty much worn out. Nothing's really been changed much in the engine and I think I just said much too much, but there's a third time. Yeah. Anyway, you'll see more performance out of it if you're lacking in engine power, HP, something like that. I had positive results. There's more higher end RPM, and there's the shift points are slightly different, and I'm not sure why the shift points are different. I think the transmission is shifting differently because it's got more power behind it now. I don't know, but I got more performance out of this modification, and the engine sounds more throaty, sounds more deeper tone. It's pretty much all better, and it doesn't smoke as much. Like, there is a little bit of a white smoke coming out because, to be quite honest, it is burning a little bit of oil, but not a lot, because I check my dipstick every 2 weeks or a week or so, and I'm not really seeing any oil dropping in level. So yes, as you hear me talk, it kind of sounds like, well, from your perspective, it probably sounds like there's a lot of a placebo effect going on, but I'm pretty sure the engine sounds pretty different. Sounds more aggressive overall. So yeah, just to kind of like put that out there, it's not some kind of a placebo effect going on, but yeah, should end this video before it gets too sciencey in here. So that's about it. I'm gonna be chucking these spark plugs in my car, and pretty much free performance, really. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for more car updates, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.